Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services here this afternoon, we would kindly ask if everyone would please turn off or silence all electronic devices. Thank you.
As a father's compassion for his children, so may Adonai, our God, have compassion for all of the family and friends of Gary Romisher, who we come here to remember today. God knows that we are fashion. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over us, and we are no more. But we know that God's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children endures age after age, unchanging. We begin our service by reciting Psalms, thus linking Gary's life to our Jewish tradition, to the Jewish people, and to the eternity of God.
Shir lama'alot esayna elerim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim v'aretz Al yitain lamot raglecha yanum shomerecha Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam.
Psalm 121, a song for ascents. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and will guard your soul. Adonai guards your going and coming, now and forever.
Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echsar. Bino deshe yarbitzeni amei menuchot yina haleni. Nafshi eshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam kelech b'gei salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha heme nachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulcha neged sorarai. Dishanta v'ashemen roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chasid yurdefuni koyemei chayai. V'shavtu b'veit Adonai leorech yamim. Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, which of course is known as the Shepherd's Psalm, a psalm that guides us through difficult moments like this one. I invite you, if you would like, to join me as we recite it in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Tomorrow in synagogue, we'll finish reading the book of Leviticus, the book of Vayikra, the third book of the Torah. But it's already in the first book of the Torah that we learn that when a loved one passes away, it is members of the family who come forward to share stories and memories. And that ancient tradition is something that we will continue today. As first we'll call upon Gary's sons, Michael and then David, then his granddaughter Allie, and finally his sister Deanie. Michael.
Let's hope I can see it. On behalf of my family, I'd like to thank everyone who is here today and for those who have sent their condolences. Your presence is comforting during this time and a reminder of the impact that my father had on so many lives. I am Gary's oldest son, Michael, and I'm honored to speak on behalf of my dad today. It makes me proud to say that my father was a very good man. Everything's blurring now because of all the tears. A person who modeled how to live a decent and meaningful life. Dad was a family man first, whether it was attending our Little League games, cheering us on at Woodcrest swim meets, driving us to Hebrew school, or helping with homework. Dad was the sort of parent who always showed up. He coached from the side, believed in us, and consistently supported David, Sharon, and me as we moved through our childhood. Dad found ways for our family to have fun, whether it was taking family trips with the Greenspuns to Florida or planning family dance lessons for Sharon's bat mitzvah. That was painful. We spent many Sunday nights having dinner at Mario's, which offered us a chance to connect as a family as well as to avoid my mom's flounder. Dad found ways to bring our family together to make lasting memories. My dad was there for me in both the good and the challenging times of my life, and I will always be grateful for the unconditional love he offered. He showed me what it means to devote yourself to your family. Dad also showed me what it means to be a good husband. My mom was his true love, and their relationship has been strong for the 70 years they were together. He loved and admired my mom deeply, and we were all fortunate to be surrounded by their loving relationship as we moved through the joys and challenges of life. Dad's love for the family extended to his career as a doctor. Dad was a natural caretaker and a very sharp doctor. He spent over 50 years practicing medicine, where he was a popular and well-respected radiologist. He constantly diagnosed issues that weren't in his specialty, always sending you to the correct specialist in that field. Maybe too good, he diagnosed me with Crohn's when I was 13. He was also a doctor with a special bedside manner. He was the rare radiologist with almost every patient. He spoke with almost every patient. I'm going to tell you the story, like the time that a woman thought she swallowed a tab from the old days when the tab actually came off. And she thought she swallowed it, and she complained of scratchiness in her throat. On the x-ray, there was a circle that appeared on her neck, in her neck. The woman was fortunate to have Dr. R, as he was often called. Instead of sending her to surgery, upon examination by my father, he discovered that there was no tab from a Coke can. Instead, the woman had a metal hair tie around her ponytail, which showed up on the x-ray. Boy, did that technician get in trouble. Dad was always there for his staff as well. He was always there to help with any problems. His technicians would call him for medical advice, even after he retired, and he always came through. I also want to thank my dad's aides, Pat, Brandy, and Coombe, who treated us like family these past several months. Dad was our doctor. He cut through the red tape. When David needed his ankle drained from rheumatoid arthritis or Sharon needed to see a specialist, there was no waiting. He was instrumental in Lauren's medical care and the medical care for all of our grandchildren, all of his grandchildren. We always had the best doctors right away. When I was going through chemo and my stem cell transplant, Dad was a regular at the hospital, monitoring my treatment, consulting with my doctors, and ensuring I got the best treatments possible. He was the dad who spent the night in the hospital with me, making a bed in the corner of the room and staying with me to make sure I was okay. He was always giving of himself completely. Dad also liked to have fun, and he loved the Philadelphia sports teams. Going to the Eagles games with him and Dave every Sunday will always be one of my fondest memories. We went to see the Phillies win the World Series in 1980. We went to the Super Bowl loss in 1981, but saw them win in 2018. He went to the Flyers Stanley Cup championships in 1974 and 1975. He left David and I at home, but that's another story for another day. Dad's favorite pastime was comedy. Whether it was pulling practical jokes like spritzing water through his teeth so everyone thought it was starting to rain when we ate outside, or holding a hand buzzer. When my father met my mother, he introduced himself with a hand buzzer. Or sending hundreds of jokes through the email. It may have been thousands. Dad always found ways to have fun. He always had a joke to tell and always enjoyed a good laugh. His humor kept everyone relaxed and in a good mood. I'm missing a page. Great. Not good? Wait a second. Oh, here it is. I got it. Okay, stuck together. My father had a very good and long life. He lived life to the fullest and accomplished all his goals, except moving to Florida after his residency. Ultimately, he accomplished his main goal of caring for my mom, sister, brother, and me, and of helping many, many people. I'm so very fortunate to have been his son. Dad, thank you for giving me such a good life. You instilled in me, in your children, and in your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren, a set of traditions and values that we will all carry forward in our lives. That is the mark of a deeply meaningful life. To quote Maya Angelou, if you're going to live, leave a legacy. Make a mark on the world that can't be erased. Dad, that is exactly what you did, and we are forever grateful to you. I love and admire you beyond measure. Alav HaShalom.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I'm David, the youngest of the three children of Gary and Sylvia. And if you don't know me, I fear you may be in the wrong funeral home. So, public speaking, not my favorite. In fact, it's people's #1 most feared activity, only to be closely followed by death. I would have offered to switch places with Dad, but if you saw him in the last couple of months, it was his time. And I get to wear my funeral fedora. So today we gather here to celebrate the life and legacy of a remarkable man, my father, Gary Romisher. It is with a heavy heart and immense gratitude that I stand before you to deliver this eulogy for the most kind, caring, compassionate, and generous man, a loving husband, and a wonderful father. Dad was a real mensch. He was a sweetheart of a man. He was a true hero, and he was my idol. Words cannot fully capture the depth of my father's character and the impact he had on the lives he touched. He was not just a father. He was a guiding light, a pillar of strength, and a source of unwavering love and support. His presence in our lives was a constant. He always showed up, whether it was a sporting event, a graduation, or someone's illness. He was a reminder of the beauty of humanity and the power of love. My father possessed a kindness that knew no bounds. he had an incredible ability to empathize with others, to see beyond their pain and struggles, offer a helping hand or a comforting word. Whether it was a coworker or a friend in need, he would always go the extra mile to make a difference. When I began practicing dentistry, he always reminded me to take care of his girls, meaning technicians who always worked with him. He would never come to my office without Danish, donuts, or deli. He showed us that the little things made a big difference. His generosity knew no limits, and he taught us the value of giving without expecting anything in return. But it was his compassion that truly set him apart. He had a rare gift of understanding and a genuine concern for the well-being of others that was always evident when he was meeting with his patients. He could see the pain behind a smile and the loneliness and fear hidden beneath laughter. My father never hesitated to lend an ear, offer words of solace, or share a heartfelt embrace. All right, that's a little bit of a stretch. He wasn't a big hugger, but his compassion was balm that healed wounds and mended broken spirits, and it touched countless lives. As a husband and father, he was an inspiration to us all. He cherished my mother, his soulmate, with a love that was pure and selfless. Their partnership of almost 67 years, Michael. You added a couple in there. It's okay. Their partnership of almost 67 years was built on a foundation of trust, respect, and unfaltering commitment. He showed us what it meant to be a devoted spouse, a loving partner who stood by his companion through thick and thin. Dad was the rock in the mortar. He was the provider and the protector. Family always came first. I always thought if I could be half the man that my dad was, I'd be doing okay. To his children, he was our hero. He was the one who believed in us when we doubted ourselves, who encouraged us to dream big and reach for the stars. His resolute belief in our potential shaped our lives and gave us the confidence to overcome challenges. He taught us the importance of integrity, hard work, and perseverance. And through his actions, he instilled in us the values of compassion, empathy, and love. The memories we hold of my father will forever be etched in our hearts. His laughter, especially at his own jokes, his warm embrace, his wise words of guidance, those serious talks when his voice became deeper and softer. He was imparting his wisdom on us. They are the treasures we will carry with us always. Though he may no longer be physically present, his spirit lives on in the countless lives he touched, the kindness he spread, and the love he shared. As Dad's Alzheimer's worsened and his wisdom declined and his voice was lost, he always retained his ever-pleasant persona. He remained a sweetheart until his last breath. So let us remember my father for the extraordinary human being that he was. Let us honor his memory by embracing his legacy of kindness, generosity, compassion, and love. As we say goodbye today, let us celebrate a life well lived, a life that touched us profoundly and made the world a brighter place. Rest in peace, Dad. Your love, Your love and light will always guide us. You will forever be my hero.
Well, tough shoes to follow in. Thank you to everyone who came here today to commemorate the life of my papa. I'm Allie, the first of 7 granddaughters. I was fortunate to have grown up around the corner from my Mimi and Papa, so naturally we spent a great deal of time together. Many a time you could find us sitting at the kitchen table, munching on a third of a rye bagel that he'd nicely doctored with cream cheese and lox cut up into very small pieces and evenly distributed throughout. This practical yet particular mannerism was just one of the many things that will live on in his legacy. But what I'll cherish and admire most was his warmth, his kindness, and his devotion to his family. He was simultaneously so loving and so easy to love. His was a kind of love that was contagious and brought a smile to everyone around him. Every Tuesday night while my Mimi was at tennis, you could find him at Fienni's, a local Italian restaurant where he was a regular. If I was lucky, I'd get an invitation to join. Immediately after walking through the door, he'd be greeted with the warmest embrace and the biggest smiles from the entire restaurant staff. "Doc," they'd say, "how are you? We have your table for you." And off we'd go like local celebrities. I felt very cool. He was the kind of guy that always put others first and would do anything to set you up for future success. One day, my pop-up turned to me and said very matter-of-factly, "You know, one day I think you're going to be a country clubber, and so I think we should get you some golf lessons." I'm not much of an athlete, so naturally I was a little apprehensive. But rest assured, I survived, and I fared pretty well. And most importantly for me, I looked pretty cute in my golf ensemble. We even went back for a couple lessons. And though I'm not quite a country clubber yet, I've got a foot in at Boca West, thanks to my pop-up. He always put his family first, and if you had a problem, particularly medical, he was there to fix it. When Lauren and I were young, before Sophie was born, we were running in the kitchen, and Lauren sliced her chin on the corner of our kitchen counter. Chaos ensued, obviously. But in the blink of an eye, my pop-up had arranged for Lauren to go to his cousin Kenny's house, who was a facial plastic surgeon, and a few sutures later, Lauren was as good as new. One of his favorite roles was his role as Dr. Romisher, and this was a title he wore with the utmost pride. Every summer when he was young, he worked as a waiter at Champs and would always tell me that he made $1,000, which he'd put toward his medical school tuition. He'd go on to become a brilliant radiologist, one who, unlike all others, personally delivered his reports to his patients. He had an unparalleled bedside manner and a way about him that made his patients feel at ease. He was so passionate about his work, and he loved sharing this passion with me and I with him. Nothing made him prouder than for me to follow in his footsteps. Pop-up, I love you so much. With every bite of bagel, every Fianni's dinner, and every introduction to my patients, I'll think of you. Your legacy will live on in me, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren, and will continue to make you proud every single day. Thank you.
And now Deanie, batting cleanup.
I have been incredibly fortunate to have had two big brothers. Leo went into the Navy for 4 years after I was born. Gary was 13 years older than me, and he never let me forget that on the day of his bar mitzvah, he was wheeling me up and down the street in my carriage. From day one, I worshiped Gary. He was my pal, my playmate, confidant, teacher, and best friend. Gary was my hero. He loved that role and took full advantage. As his young little sister, he had finally had someone to torture, like Leo had done to him. I was Gary's shadow. The poor guy couldn't even go to the bathroom without me following. Gary was always a wise guy who teased me and kept me on my toes. We lived in a big, spooky house in Philadelphia, and he loved to jump out, dressed in white sheets, to scare me and my friends. When he was in medical school before he got married, I never knew what parts from his anatomy dissection class I would find in my bed. True. We always joked that our mother cooked and prepared enough food to feed the Russian army. That was because Gary would call that he was bringing home a friend for dinner, but would show up with 3 or 4. My mother had to be prepared at all times. Gary's friends were always around. It was like having bonus brothers. Saul, Bob, Bernie, Bert, Maury, Murray, Perch, and Fish. They all came to study, and the talcum powder fights were legendary. Mom was ready to kill them, all of them. Then they would clump down the stairs and invade the freezer for ice cream and cake. They were like locusts hunting for snacks. I was only 6 or 7 years old, but I got to hang with the group at the Tep fraternity house at Temple. I even helped them paint their basement party room. As we grew older, we even grew closer. To this day, I put locks on my bagels the way Gary did. That is truly a legacy of his. And find myself not eating the foods that he didn't. When I was in high school, college, dating, and married, Gary was the one that I always confided in and sought advice from. One day, I realized that he was doing the same with me. We shared hopes, dreams, and secrets. It was amazing to realize that he trusted me and felt about me like I had always felt about him. I'll share one favorite story. Gary's favorite food was banana cake, and I did my best to keep him supplied. One day, he decided he wanted to learn to make it, and it would be our secret. He came over to our house, even put on an apron, because my mother always insisted when you deal with food, you wear an apron. And I had him measure the ingredients and prepare the entire cake. He was so proud when he took it out of the oven. You would have thought that he had just completed successful brain surgery. We spent the day laughing, giggling like fools. It was one of the best days of my adult life. Gary, thank you for always having my back, for making me feel so loved and respected, and for always being my best friend. I love you more than you could ever imagine.
Thank you, Deanie and Allie and David and Michael for sharing those beautiful memories and reflections about Gary. You know, in the Jewish calendar right now, we're counting the Omer, counting the days from Passover until Shavuot. And each night we recite a blessing over the counting. Today is the 36th day of the Omer. By reciting a blessing each day, we are reminded to appreciate all of our daily blessings and to make our days count. This was a lesson that Gary certainly understood. Throughout his 88 years, he knew how to make his days count, and he helped all of you make your days count too. That's because Gary took care of everyone, as a doctor, a friend, and especially for his family. For his beloved wife, Sivia, during their almost 67 years of marriage, but 70 years together. You're both right. For his children, Michael and Laura, Sharon, Zichronah Livracha, blessed memory, and John, David and Janet. And of course, his beloved grandchildren, Sean, Abigail, Riley, Allie, Laura, and Sophie, Rachel and Alyssa, as well as his great-grandchildren, Savannah and Molly. Gary also made the days count for his siblings, for Deanie and for Alan, and for Leo and Betty, Zichronam Livracha, blessed memory, as well as his nieces and nephews, Adrian and Ariel, Hillary, Ellen, and Stephen, also blessed memory, and so many other family members, patients, and dear friends. It is because Gary made his days count and helped make your days count that we know that his memory will always be for a blessing. As Deanie said, Gary grew up in Strawberry Mansion. His father had a fruit store in Camden, but he passed away when Gary was only 4 years old, leaving his mother Rose and his older brother Leo. Those were challenging years, but eventually things got better. Rose remarried, Deanie came along, and Gary grew up, determined to make things good. And he did. He graduated from Central High School and then put himself through college at Temple and medical school at Jefferson. At Temple, he joined the Tep fraternity, which not only gave him lifelong friends, it also taught him how to wait tables, which became one of the many jobs that helped put him through school. Gary was a waiter at restaurants in Philly and Atlantic City, and with the Davis caterers for bar mitzvahs and weddings. He was always a people person and enjoyed waiting, but perhaps his most fun job was driving a merry-go-round truck from neighborhood to neighborhood while the song Davy Crockett blasted from the speakers. Now, I had to ask, what exactly is a merry-go-round truck, though I see some of you nodding about that. It's exactly how it sounds, a truck with a merry-go-round on it that would go neighborhood to neighborhood, and kids would run up and pay a nickel or a dime to ride the merry-go-round. Gary enjoyed being with people and bringing that joy to others. It was when Gary was 18 that he met Sylvia, who was just 16. Michael shared part of the story of how they met, but let me add a few more details that Sylvia shared the other night. They met at a Sweet 16 party at a restaurant, and Gary saw a beautiful girl from across the room, and he just had to go up and meet her. So he walked over and stuck out his hand and introduced himself, and when Sylvia shook it, it buzzed. Somehow it still worked. And Sylvia and Gary, of course, started dating. Their relationship grew, and they were married in June 1956. You know, when a couple stands together in the chuppah to be married, we recite for them Sheva Brachot, 7 blessings of joy. And in 2 of those blessings, we pray that they become Ra'im Ahuvim, beloved companions. Sylvia, you and Gary were partners in raising a family together and making a home together. You traveled together with dear friends and had wonderful times at the shore and in Florida and built a beautiful life together. That blessing that was recited under your chuppah was certainly fulfilled. You made sure that your days and years together really counted. After they were married, they lived with Sylvia's parents for a couple of years while she finished college. Then they moved to the Parkway Apartments, and then across the river to Haddon Heights, and finally to 511 Gatewood Road in Cherry Hill. As we know, Gary was the chief radiologist at Zurbrugg Memorial Hospital for over 35 years, and then worked for Larchmont Imaging until his retirement. And he was an excellent diagnostician. He helped not only his patients, who he insisted on meeting with individually to get to know them better and understand their issues, but also family and friends. Everyone knew that if you had a medical issue, Gary was the one to call. He would take care of you. He knew where to go and what to do, and he made sure everyone got the care that they needed. Gary made sure that his patients, whether in the office or from family and in the community, knew that they counted. Now we heard Michael and David share wonderful memories and reflections about their dad, and Allie shared memories about him as her pop-pop. Gary loved and was so proud of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He would do anything for them. He loved playing tennis and, of course, Philly sports, especially the Eagles, and he had many lifelong friends that he collected over the years, including those he met through TBS, especially within your chavurah. It was when they came to South Jersey that Gary and Sylvia joined TBS. Sylvia said that they joined because of the Hamish community and also because of Rabbi Lewis. And yesterday, I went and pulled the family file, which, as you can see, is quite large. And it tells a story of years being connected to a community. membership forms, letters of gratitude and for volunteering, records of simchas and sorrows, and yes, even Michael, Sharon, and David's Hebrew School report cards, which we'll discuss later. Especially yours, David. Man, there's some crazy stuff in here. I remember Gary smiling and schmoozing at his granddaughter's bat mitzvahs and at high holiday services. And all of this testifies to how Sivy and Gary understood the importance of Jewish community in helping to make all of our days count. And when asked about the lessons that Gary taught, Deanie, you started by saying that your brother taught you how to treat people. And Sivy, you agreed, noting that when Gary sold his medical practice, he made sure that every employee would have a job with the new owners, something that was unheard of. David, you said that your dad taught you that if you work for yourself, then you'll never be out of a job. And he also taught you to always take off Wednesdays. And you all agreed that Gary set a wonderful example of generosity of spirit and good sense. He was a very smart person who went after what he wanted and almost always achieved it. He had the foresight to plan ahead in all sorts of ways to make this happen, something that he did even for today. Now, a few weeks ago, I came over to visit Sivy and Gary, and we knew that Gary did not have much time left. And Sivy, when I was over there, you came over and gave me this poem. It's a poem that Gary once heard Rabbi Lewis read at a funeral, and he found it to be very moving. So we asked Rabbi Lewis for a copy. And at the top, Rabbi Lewis wrote Gary a short note with his initials, and Gary requested that it be read today. Listen. When I am dead, cry for me little. Think of me sometimes, but not too much. It is not good for you, or your wife, or your husband, or your children, to allow your thoughts to dwell too long on the dead. Think of me now and again as I was in life, at some moment which it is pleasant to recall, but not for long. Leave me in peace, as I shall leave you, too, in peace. While you live, let your thoughts be with the living. Even now, Gary, thinking about all of you. Our thoughts are with the living, but they are also inextricably linked with Gary, as they always will be. That's because of the indelible mark that he has left on us in our world. Even after receiving his diagnosis of Alzheimer's, even as things got more difficult over the past 2 years, he remained sweet and gentle. His aides loved him, and he was blessed with some wonderful aides. And the way his family, and especially you, Sivia, took care of him, making sure that he could remain at home and be as comfortable as possible, was truly an incredible blessing. For all that Gary gave to you all over the years, you were able to return that kindness and generosity to him. Sivia, every night during these difficult days, you told Gary the same thing before bed. You told him that he was the best husband, the best father, the best brother, the best son, the best doctor, the best boss, and the best friend. He was all of that, and this is how we will all remember him. You said that Gary's favorite song was My Way by Frank Sinatra, and he lived that way, not in the selfish sense, but in a kind and gentle way with purpose and persistence, making sure that his days counted. The practice of counting the Omer, reciting a blessing as we count each day for 7 weeks, teaches us to be aware of the blessings in every day of our life, large and small, and that we do what we can to make every day and every person count. Even though he is gone, Gary's example will continue to teach us this same lesson. And by learning it and living it, we will ensure that his memory will always be for a blessing. Please rise for a final prayer.
ברחמים שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע והסירים. את נשמת גדליה בן שלמה ורחל שלח לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. הנא בעל רחמים, הסתירה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן, אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Gary Romisher, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
From here, we will head to Crescent Memorial Park for the burial. After that, the family will be receiving comforters at Sivia and Gary's home, 511 Gatewood Road in Woodcrest. They're also receiving comforters tomorrow evening, and there'll be a Shiva Minyan as well on Sunday evening at 7:30 p.m. If we can all rise once more, please.
A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time for planting and a time for uprooting, a time for hurting and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up. A time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for crying and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining. A time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for letting go, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for speaking and a time